Welcome to the Divine Style podcast, where the journey to self-love and spiritual awakening begins. I'm your host, Gerlinda Stella, a psychic medium, intuitive life coach, and guide on your path to self-discovery. Here we delve deep into the heart of what it means to truly know and love oneself. I am very excited to introduce you to Maggy Whitehouse. She is a minister based in Devon, the author of 17 books, a Kabbalah teacher, a Bible metaphysics expert. Maggy's diverse background includes radio, TV production. She was a faith presenter on BBC Radio. And even more surprisingly, Maggy is also a stand-up comedian. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely. I've just realised that if I sit badly, it may look like I've got horns coming out of my head, which of course may be the interpretation some people put on this later.
Oh my goodness. I felt like when I reached out to you that I was reaching out to a celebrity, and because I have read your book, Living Kabbalah, and it has made such a difference in my life to my understanding of sort of pre-Christianity. I grew up a Lutheran with Lutheran faith, and then have found it very interesting to integrate that into spirituality, because some people have such conflicting views around the church and what's going on in even Catholic faith or different faiths. And so I was very excited to find out that you're also a minister. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Wonderful. I'm so glad. I'm a minister because I thought there's so much that I need to unpack about the damage that Christianity has caused, because there's three things. There's the idea of what Jesus taught, which is wonderful. There's the aspect that he is the Christ, therefore the Son of God, therefore you can only worship him, even though he never asked you to worship him, not once. He said, please follow me. And there's the church, which is a completely different thing. The church is the structure, and most of the problems really have come from the structure of all religions. And Christianity has gone down many routes that I know that Jesus would not have approved of. I mean, every now and then I look at it and think, what part of love your enemies and do good to those who hate you did you not actually understand? So it's really important for me that I did become ordained, because it doesn't give me more credibility. It makes me more of a heretic in many ways, but at least I can stand there and say, but I'm in this and I care about it. And the best criticism of the bad is the practice of the better. And that's what I'm going to endeavour to do.
Politics and religion are those off topics. So it's really interesting in families and in friendships when we do have these conversations, when people do get quite caught up in the dogma and talking about what's written in the Bible. I know recently I was talking to one of my children, one of their friends, and they were saying, you must fear God. And one of the things that struck me was in your email signature, you have a beautiful quote.
The Hafiz quote, the one that says, it's a terrible sin to make anybody fear God. Yes. Well, that's exactly where I wanted to go to start with. So well done you. You're very intuitive. The word, it's in the 111th Psalm, and it's also, I believe, in Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And it's a mistranslation. The word is yira, and it means awe or respect. So to translate that as fear puts it immediately into, you have to be afraid, you have to serve, you have to be very careful how you behave. But actually it just says, be in awe of this divinity. Remember that it does deserve your respect. And if you can be in awe of it, then you don't fear it. You just go, what wonders are here? And that changes the whole ball game for me.
Wow, that is a really beautiful way to put it. You do have two podcasts I've discovered now, and I highly recommend that they check Maggy Whitehouse's podcast. I will put links in the show notes, because you talk so much about the philosophy of the Bible when you can read between the lines.
Absolutely. And if you do the research, and let's face it, not very many people want to do the research, and it's my job to do the research. And being a journalist for so many years, it's my job to try and present it in a way that is understandable, quite simple. The teachings are all simple. It doesn't mean they're easy. They're not easy, but they're simple. And so many people have done such excellent work. One of my favorite teachers is a lady called Dr. Margaret Barker, who's British, and she is a Methodist lay preacher, and she's researched the first temple, which is very in line with the Franciscan version of Christianity that I follow. I can explain a bit more about that in a minute. But what's so wonderful is that her books they're about that big. She's a bit like J.K. Rowling in that she wrote books that started off that wide and then got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And her latest one, the Lady in the Temple, is about that thick. And it took me about 6 months to get through it, but I made notes all the way through. So, and I'm a friend of Margaret's as well, and she knows my work, and she also edited one of my books and is editing another for me. So I know I've got it right. It's always very good to make sure that you've got it right. But I can put out her teaching for people who are beginners who say, oh, now where do I follow up on that? So I can send them on to her if they're willing to sit down and go, oh, and another, oh my God, oh, really, really, really.
It is wonderful how you find the right people at the right time with all those resources, isn't it? And to be able to have these really amazing conversations and dig deep into the word. How would you recommend that somebody who's had a really negative experience maybe re-engage with some of Jesus's teaching?
If they want an external teacher, I don't think there's anybody better on the planet than Richard Rohr, Father Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan based in Albuquerque. He's finished his work now. He's sort of retired. He's very elderly, but he has a school of work on YouTube and free work and a daily meditation, and it's all based on love. That God is love. And of course, one of the biggest questions people have is, if God is meant to be omnipotent, how can God be good? Because God is all the terrible things that happen. But Richard is really good at unpacking that and saying, no, that's the church's view. It's not in the teachings. And my job is sort of to back him up, because I'm more of a Hebrew Testament scholar. I mean, I'm not actually a scholar. I haven't got a PhD or something. I've just studied it for generations. Well, for not generations. I'm not that old. Not this time round anyway. But studied it and worked with it and worked with teachers. So you just start realizing that there's so much of it has been mistranslated, used for control, used for power. But the first thing to do is go and read Jesus's Beatitudes. They're not easy, but it basically says it's the people who have been hurt, it's the downtrodden, it's the poor, it's the marginalized, it's the outcast who are the ones who are closest to God, because they haven't got that cover up of the power aspect. And Jesus is very, very clear that the outsider, the ones who weren't of his own religion, were the ones who got him more, because they were more unpacked. They had no one else to turn to. Quite often, I mean, certainly in my own case, I was what you'd call an armchair Christian. I turned up at Christmas. I put C of E on any form I had to, and I believed in something. I knew there was something, but I didn't take much notice of it until I got married at 32 to an atheist, and he died a year after the marriage, and that was my huge wake-up call. I can see that now. That was a huge gift for me, though horrible, horrible at the time. And at Henry's deathbed, a hospital chaplain came along and sat beside and said, "And what religion are you, my dear?" And I said, "Church of England." And he said, "And what religion is your husband?" And I said, "Oh, he's an atheist." And he literally got up and said, "Oh, I'm very sorry, but if he doesn't believe in our Lord Jesus Christ, he can't go to heaven," and left the room. Now, that was more than 30 years ago, and it does not happen except in terrible Orthodox situations nowadays. But that really was an angelic thing for me, because it made me go, what? This is a better man than I. He's more honest than I. He's kinder than I. Hang on, I get to go to heaven because I signed on the correct dotted line. No, 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 no. So that was the huge turning point for me. It woke me up to what was going on and how this could not be compatible with the God of love. So I just started investigating that, and that was the beginning of my journey. But just to go back to your previous question, which is how do you get into, basically was how do you get into relationship with divinity when you've been taught so much cruelty about it? The very simple answer, well, it's not a simple answer, I'll try and make it simple, is there are different aspects to the Holy One. There is the overarching divinity which created the universe. And in the Bible, that's known as Elohim, which means gods. It's a plural and it's feminine. The God of humanity only turns up in the second chapter of Genesis with the creation of humanity. And then Elohim becomes Yahweh Elohim. And after that, Yahweh basically took over because the law settled in. Yahweh is the God of humanity and the God that people think is the judgmental God. But the overarching God is, if you like, Mother Nature, or Elohim, the divine feminine. And all the ancient teachings and the first temple of the Hebrews acknowledge this. And Elohim can be present within you as God, the intimate, if you like. This God, the transcendent, and God the intimate. There's a better phrasing for that, and I've completely
I
forgotten what
love
it
it.
was.
It makes sense.
But what to do is to literally sit there. If you don't meditate, just contemplate for a minute. Just try and be quiet for a minute or two, and then just say, "Are you there?" And you'll get a response. You'll get an affirmation. I am here. It probably won't be in English words. It will be a sensation. And if you don't get it to start with, just keep trying for a few days, because you will have blocked it out through fear, but it's there. And it will be there. And it's always a gentle voice. It's a still, small voice. And it's always loving. If you get any kind of voice that is critical, then that's your upbringing or your mother. It's not God. It's locked into the ego, into the reticular activating system. But there is a presence within you connected to the great divinity, the huge divinity, which seems to us to be so hugely impersonal, but it's so extraordinary that there is a part of it implanted in you. You are God force. Everything in the universe comes from Elohim, which is the God force. Everything, a stone, a worm, even, the beautiful things you've got on the shelves behind you have just a touch of God force. And all living, moving, breathing things have a lot of God force. And humanity, as far as we know, is the only species that can be aware of that God force. Animals and plants just exist within the God force, and they don't worry about anything. No animal fears an anticipated death. And when an animal dies, yes, of course it might suffer, but it doesn't suffer the way the human does, because we know that we're going to lose our personality when we die. The only part of us that dies is the ego, which is the part of us that identifies with this body, this life, this family, this love. And that will dissolve. And we fear that because we don't realize that to lose that brings us into our true self, which is absolutely united with all the blessings of the universe. Was that simple enough?
It's divine. I love talking with you.
Thank you. I
I
know this is true. I have direct experience. I know I can only talk about my truth. How you experience the world is going to be different, and it's going to be unique to you. But I think that's the best way to start, to get into a relationship with this beingness.
Yes, and because we do tend to look outside ourselves so often, and I love
Mm.
that idea of just coming back and sitting with yourself and recognizing the God within is beautiful. You did mention though that the outside force as well. So is there, when people are communing, can it be, I guess where I'm going with this is, some people are very fearful of God, and
Yeah.
when in the Bible they talk about demons and entities, and this can bring about, hell and all of these sort of dark forces, this good versus evil.
There are negative energies. In the world of the heavens, there is pure creation and pure destruction. It's not evil, but humanity has sometimes locked onto that. What Jesus called demons, we would probably call mental health issues. However, I do know of a situation just very, very recently where a lovely woman, her daughter took her own life, which was very tragic. The girl had a lot of mental health issues and also physical issues, and couldn't take it any longer and chose to take her own life. And she stayed around. She didn't pass through. If you've ever seen the movie Ghost, it's a long time ago now, but you'll know that the central character is murdered and the light comes for him, but he doesn't go. The light comes for everybody, but some people don't go because they're so tied still emotionally with what happens on earth. And a sudden death can often help make that. You don't know you're dead. Anyway, this lady's daughter hung around and the mother could feel her and took comfort from the fact that she was around, but it wasn't helpful. But she was saying, "Oh, my daughter is my angel," but her sister was very aware that this wasn't really working very well for her because she was starting to neglect her other daughter, and she was withdrawing from the world and talking to this aspect of her daughter. So she said, "Can you help?" So I have had some training in this. So yes, I went in and ensured that the daughter had a pathway through and got her guardians, her guides to help her through. And the mother lost her, which was a great grief to her because the daughter had gone on to where she was meant to be. But the mother realized that that was what had happened. However, she still went on grieving. Her second daughter got into some great emotional turmoil because she felt she couldn't replace her sister, if you know what I mean. And there was difficulties in the family. And then the mother started saying, "She's back. My daughter is back." And started getting involved in quite a very esoteric, but not a very helpful esoteric group, which was supporting her. And yes, your daughter is your guardian angel and she's guiding you. And there was poltergeist activity in the house. So the sister came back to me and said, "I'm really worried about this." So my colleague, Deb Rowley from New Zealand, who's an amazing woman, please interview her.
Oh,
I'll talk to you about her later. She's extraordinary. And we went and had a look, and this was an external negative energy that had latched onto the mother in the form of her daughter.
mm.
And this can happen. It's rare, but we do if we live in a land of resentment and anger and hatred. Like attracts like, and energy attracts light. And if there are any beings that humans who haven't moved through, they don't move through because there's some issue and they will slowly and steadily just draw a certain amount of darkness to them. There is darkness, but it's all human created. It doesn't come from God. It comes from generations of war and hatred and resentment and violence and guilt. There are people all around the world, this side of the veil and the other side of the veil, who work tirelessly to help these people go through, and everybody goes through in the end. And because time isn't the same after death, even if somebody appears to have been on the earth as an discarnate entity for 100 years, when you go to move them through, it will appear like it was only a week or two for them. So, there is always mercy, there is always kindness, but we have work to do. There's no doubt about that in my heart.
Incredible. So if people are going through something like that, where they are in deep grief, or they think that something is sort of there that maybe pretending, or
Mhm.
is creating that sort of that fear, like you said, or that distress, what would you
Yeah.
recommend that they do?
Just looking for a prayer that I've got, which I'm going to send you if I may, which you could send out to people who inquire, or they could ask me. It's a wonderful prayer of protection, which is just basically say, "I am responsible for my life and my body, and I now turn away all negative energies and I call in the fires of grace to heal and cleanse me." And it's very powerful and it's very good. And that's the first thing to do, because you don't really want to be, if you're feeling bad and difficult, you don't really want to be going to try and find somebody on that level of energy, because you all automatically find somebody of a slightly lower energy. And it's really important, if you're going to a healer, to go to somebody who will not allow their energy to drop to yours. And
That's a
that's
great
why,
point.
yeah, you've got to have somebody who'll just say, "If you want me to help you up and show you how to live at the higher level of energy, I will do that, but I will not lift you up and hold you up myself, because that is disempowering." It's really important to allow people to come up, and also to say to people that, because the divinity is love, once you get down to a certain level, it's quite hard for it to contact you because your energy is dense. So always to just sit for 5 minutes a day to try and balance yourself and say, are you there? Are you there? That literally starts to open up the throat chakra, which in Kabbalah we call Da'at, the window between the world. And in Kundalini teaching, it says that the Kundalini rising is quite often blocked off here because we've not spoken our truth. We haven't known our truth and we haven't spoken our truth. So working around the throat chakra is also very good. If you're a Reiki healer or trained in any healing, you put your hands there and send healing to yourself at each point when you go into a form of meditation, just to set the intent. I wish this blockage to be cleared so I can receive grace. Oh, and another thing, the fires of hell. There's no mention of hell in the Bible. It's Gehenna, or the underland, Sheol. It's just the underworld. Now, it's translated as hell because people are daft, she says politely, but it comes from, there is, metaphorically at least, an eternal fire, the eternal fires of grace, which purify you. And you can't get to the higher echelons of heaven without walking through these fires of grace. And they cleanse out from you all the hatred, the negativity. So it's like doing a fire walk, really. The fires are eternal, but you're never in them for eternity. You just have to walk through them to be clear. And of course, it's very frightening to go on a fire walk or something like that. You think this is to hurt. And I do a meditation with my group. I have an online group once a week, which is absolutely free. So if anybody wants to find out about that, there's details on my Kabbalah website, which is called treeofsapphires.com. And we will do that meditation quite frequently to just say, okay, here are you standing with all your baggage and your burdens. The idea of this was given to me by another wonderful Kabbalistic teacher in San Francisco called Megan Wagner, who's also worth investigating. She's a fantastic interfaith minister and Kabbalistic teacher and a psychologist too, so she knows more about this. But basically, you do a meditation where you take your baggage into a clearing, into a forest, and you're covered in all this baggage. And there's this fire there. So you throw your baggage into the fire to release it. And then you step into the fire at that point, which becomes transformed. I got this from a book by George MacDonald called The Princess and the Goblin, where there was a magical grandmother who had a fire of incandescent roses in the grate. And if you put your hands in there, it would cleanse your body. But it hurt. But it was only brief. So I get people to step into this fire to sort of to get rid of this fear, apart from anything else, that there are fires of hell that you could possibly be in for eternity. It simply isn't true. That could not be a loving God. If God is love, there cannot be hell.
Which leads me to be curious about Revelations, which is often quoted. I think when I was younger, I when I read it, I felt it was like more like a story book, and for me, I weirdly, I actually really liked that chapter just because it was so vivid, and again, it felt like more of a story. How would you explain Revelations being in the Bible?
Okay, well, apart from anything else, apocalyptic texts like that were very common in those days. There was an apocalypse of Abraham, one of Enoch, and they were always written under the name of famous people. So the Revelation of St. John is written under the name of John the Apostle, though it very probably wasn't written by him. Revelation, as far as I can see, and the research that I've done and the people who've helped me with it, is what's known as a Merkaba meditation. Now, Merkaba means chariot in Hebrew, and Ezekiel has a Merkaba meditation in his revelation of the image of the likeness of the Holy One on a throne. And that's very important because it's the image of the likeness of the Holy One. It isn't God itself. It's going up through different levels. There's seven levels of heaven that we know about. And a Merkaba meditation takes you up through those levels. But again, you've got to go through this sloughing off experience. It's an internal journey. A real deep Merkaba meditation is never done alone. It's done with companions, and one person goes riding in the chariot in an internal journey while the others hold the energy around them. And it is dangerous. There's an old story about 4 rabbis doing a Merkaba journey. One went mad, one lost his faith, one died, and one came through safe. because they did it on their own. So it's a serious esoteric practice, and I'm not qualified to lead them. I lead very gentle versions of it, which gets you up to about the fourth heaven, but I don't take people all the way because I'm not qualified to do that. I'm not able to do that. But that is basically what it is. And it was on the teachings of the time, which represented the fact that there's a lot of belief nowadays that the early Christianity was an attempt to return to the teachings of the first temple, which honor the divine feminine. And
and I wondered if you could maybe enlighten me a little bit around that.
Sure. Well, the word is Parthenon in Greek, and it actually means pure. And there is one of the non-canonical gospels, the infancy gospel of James, which I don't actually recommend to them, particularly because it makes Mary a complete virgin, and a virgin till she dies, never has any other children, which contradicts the Bible, which says that Jesus had brothers and sisters. But basically, God could do it if God wanted to. So I'm not saying she wasn't a virgin. However, this is exactly going back to this original teaching at the beginning of Genesis. Joseph Campbell talked about the 4 stages of belief of humanity. The first was, and indigenous cultures still hold to this one, that the universe was created by a goddess. And this comes from simple observation that women give birth and men don't. Females give birth and men don't. So it was the great goddess who gave birth by parthenogenesis, which is the word which means virgin birth, to a daughter. And then the daughter managed to give birth to a child which was masculine, which can happen in parthenogenesis. Animals do this. Not very many of them, but it does happen. It's scientifically proven. And therefore, there was an overarching mother goddess, a daughter goddess who had a child who was the god. And the first belief of humanity was in the goddess. The second belief was in a goddess impregnated by a god, which is the Jesus story. And then the third one is the universe was created by a god who had to destroy a chaotic goddess and built the universe out of her dead body. That's not very healthy, is it? And then the fourth one is the universe was created by a male god alone. And we still live in the world of the male god alone. It just doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
It just doesn't. So that's one of the root behind the feeling that Christianity was trying to go back to this overarching, loving nature goddess in union, masculine and feminine. So the idea is that Jesus's mother is the goddess giving birth to the god. She's Elohim giving birth to Yahweh. And that's one of the reasons why Jesus is not referred to as God in the New Testament. He's referred to as Lord. He's not God. To say Jesus Christ is God is blasphemy. To say Jesus Christ is Lord is absolutely fine, because it's actually saying he's the Son of the high God.
So Lord, our Lord, and God are not the same thing.
Oh, in the Hebrew Testament, God is Elohim, who created the whole universe. Yahweh is the son of Elohim, whom she created when she created humanity.
Wow. Okay.
And in the Hebrew Testament, whenever you see the word God, it's Elohim. Whenever you see the word Lord, it's Yahweh. And the Hebrew Testament is written by 4 different authors. Okay, it may well be the divine word of God. Don't dispute that, but it has been edited. Oh boy, has it been edited. The oldest text is the Elohist text, which honored the divine feminine. And you can still find traces of it. The Hebrew word for the Book of Chronicles, for example, is called the Book of Things Left Out. She was and the Yahwist text, which was slightly later, was melded with it while they were still honoring the goddess. But there's more than 6,000 mentions of Yahweh and only 3,000 of Elohim. So she starts getting pushed down and pushed down and pushed down. And you can find signs of this in the prophets, Jeremiah particularly. Things have gone wrong with us since we stopped making offerings to the Queen of Heaven. And the Queen of Heaven is one of the titles that Mary the Virgin has. So it's actually a way of trying to come back to this beautiful, loving, overarching God that loves all creation, not just humanity, all creation. And although we have dominion over creation, it says that it's not domination, it's dominion. We are the creature. that can subdue the earth. But whether we should is another matter, of course. We should live with respect of the earth. And we lost that. And we really need to bring that back nowadays, because Christianity and most of the religions have no honor for the earth. They're only interested in the salvation of humanity. But the Franciscans, of which I'm one, and Richard Rohr is one, never, ever subscribed to the theory of original sin. It's a theory. It is not a doctrine of the church. We believe in original blessing.
When I gave birth to my first child, I remember going to the Catholic Church with my ex-husband's family, and the first thing that they said was, "Yeah, that she's born into sin." And I'm like, "She is not sinful. Like, she is perfect and precious and amazing." And it really got me very upset, because it is one of the things people do bring up a lot.
It is a hideous wound to inflict on anybody. There is no biblical validity for it at all. St. Paul does talk about humanity sinning, but there's one sin, because Jesus says there's one sin, and that's idolatry, which is putting anything other than your personal relationship with the Holy One first. All the commandments are broken by doing that. And all the priestcraft is doing that. Most priestcraft, I say this as a priest, is about the graven image, which is saying it is like this, and that's the only way it can be. Now, I will say it is love, but the forms of that love that flow are not graven. They are individual and perfect and beautiful. But yes, I am an independent Catholic priest, which means I'm automatically excommunicated by Pope Benedict. Isn't that nice? But fortunately, God hasn't noticed. Really
He's
nice.
still talking to you. You're doing good.
Yes, definitely still talking to me. And God talks to all of us. We just don't listen. But again, it's about saying, what am I doing? Am I taking everybody else's hearsay about God? Because if I am, I need to stop that right now, and I need to get into a relationship. It's the same with a breakup, a marital breakup. People, the friends of the family, get tied up with one story or the other, whereas there's always the paradox. It's always both sides. Both sides did the right thing, both sides did the wrong things, both sides messed up. There's always two people involved in that. But once you get bogged down into the ego story, which is she's right and he's wrong, or the other way around, you've blocked it off. You've blocked off the link to the source of all goodness that can help you be a healing factor.
I love what you said, that it's about creating your own relationship with the divine. There's so much more for us to discuss, and I would love your insights into the Ten Commandments. So we're going to pause the conversation here. I invite you all back to join us for part 2. This is a conversation you won't want to miss. As we end today's episode of the Divine Style podcast, I extend my deepest gratitude for your presence and openness on this journey of self-love, self-discovery, and spiritual growth. Farewell for now, and may your journey inward bring you the self-love you seek.